Welcome to English News right here on TMH with me, Deletna Devalko. As we move on to our headlines for today, UN chief says aid and flights are resuming to Ethiopia's Tigray region. Biden administration discussing a potential arms embargo on Ethiopia, and Ethiopia and Sudan have clashed again on the border row. UN and aid regarding 157 food trucks with humanitarian aid as well have arrived in Tigray's capital, Mekelle, on Wednesday. This is the first time in more than 6 weeks that this was possible, and the UN said another aid convoy was also moving. UN spokesman Stefan Dujarric said none of the 157 trucks that reached Mekelle carried much desperately needed fuel, which is essential to the delivery of humanitarian aid throughout the region. Secretary General Antonio Guterres said UN flights between Tigray's capital Mekelle and Ethiopia's capital Addis Ababa has also restarted, assuring the resumption of aid deliveries to Tigray and the restarting of the UN flights a really good signal. He said there was also a small hint of hope that they might lead to a more positive attitude for dialogue between the two warring parties, and the Tigray region has not received badly needed aid supplies, including food, medicine, and fuel, since the Ethiopian military began hitting Mekelle with airstrikes on the 18th of October. Even before then, the UN said only 15% of the needed supply-laden trucks had entered Tigray since mid-July. Hundreds of thousands of people in the region face famine conditions under what the United States has called a de facto humanitarian blockade. Senior U.S. diplomats say Biden and his administration is discussing a potential arms embargo on Ethiopia at the UN level. Molly Fee, the Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, speaking before the House of Representatives, said the aim is to stop foreign military hardware from going to the government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. She says the issue of arms supplies to Ethiopia is a component of our diplomacy with regional and international allies. She also added that Biden administration will not publicly determine whether this is a genocide and that leaving room for diplomatic measures.
Our primary focus has been on trying to engage diplomatically in the many ways that are available to us to reach an end to the conflict. We have decided to refrain at the current moment from making a public determination in order to allow space and time to see if the talks that are currently underway can make progress.
Fee, however, stressed that the State Department continues to track all abuses taking place in Ethiopia. Ethiopia has cut internet, phone, and media access in Tigray since the conflict erupted last year, while reportedly complicating or completely halting the delivery of humanitarian aid to the war-torn region. In related news, Congressman Brad Sherman urges the U.S. to take action to prevent Ethiopia from experiencing what happened in Rwanda in 1994. Brad Sherman, who is a senior member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, said what is unfolding in Ethiopia has all the makings of it being called a genocide.
What we're seeing, I think, is a genocide, or at least an attempted genocide, in Ethiopia. We've seen 20,000 soldiers in the Ethiopian army imprisoned months ago simply because of their Tigrayan heritage. We've seen a total media blackout in Tigray. We've seen Tigrayans referred to by top Ethiopian government officials as cancer, weeds, and rats, worthy of extermination. We've seen statements of concern by the UN Special Advisor for the Prevention of Genocide. The Ethiopian and Eritrean governments have blocked humanitarian aid as up to 900,000 Tigrayans face famine. And recently, over 30,000 Tigrayans in parts of Ethiopia outside Tigray have been herded into concentration camps where God knows what is happening to them. But in addition to the tens of thousands that have been herded into concentration camps, we see hundreds of thousands, at least 900,000, facing famine. And Dr. Putnam, the issue is, why aren't we getting them the food aid? Now, the trucks are blocked, so the first question is about air. We raised this with USAID, and we were told, in part, USAID is airlifting relief supplies to Addis. Well, obviously the Ethiopian government seems bent on killing as many Tigrayans as possible, so those trucks are not going, that aid is not going to get to the Tigrayan people. Why are we not flying these aid directly into Tigray, into Melke?
Diana Putman, who is the Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator for East Africa, why the U.S. is not flying directly into the Tigray region to save people affected by the Ethiopian government's current blockade.
First of all, there have been airstrikes recently, and we haven't been seeing planes going into Tigray.
So you're afraid the Ethiopian government would shoot down American planes? Would they dare to do that? Assistant Secretary, what would be our reaction if an American aid plane were fired upon by Ethiopian forces bent on killing as many Tigrayans as possible and killing Americans in order to do it?
Obviously, that would not be an acceptable response from a government that has historically been our partner, but I want
Is the U.S. Air Force willing to protect American or UN planes as they bring critically needed supplies necessary to prevent this genocide by famine?
That would be a decision that would, of course, be taken above my...
I would hope that you would consult Secretary Blinken.
Yes.
I remember the Clinton administration's reaction after Rwanda of wishing we had done more, and there's clearly we can do more than we are.
As we move on to our elders' call, prominent former world leaders, commonly known as the elders, want African leaders to be urgent leading role to help the Ethiopian conflict at hand. The elders issued the call for the continuant to give more support to the special envoy, former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo, who has been trying to mediate between the warring parties. The elders said that now clear that African mediation is the highest level needed to stop the fighting at hand. During this board visit to Addis Ababa in 2019, the elders supported the idea of African solutions to African problems. They said that they believe Obasanjo needs to be more active. Support from African leaders needs to achieve extreme peace. The elders, including the former UN leaders, former heads of state, and other senior politicians, have made calls in the past for a ceasefire as well as a dialogue to end the conflict, which has pitted Ethiopian National Defense Forces against the Tigray Armed Forces. In the latest call for the ceasefire, Liberian President Ellen Joseph Sirleaf, Nobel Peace Laureate and one of the elders, said the continent must add pressure to parties to the conflict to cease fire. The Oromo Liberation Army vows to march on the Ethiopian capital soon to remove Abiy Ahmed from his government. Deputy Commander-in-Chief at OLA, Gemechu Aboy, predicts that they, with partners fighting against an Addis Ababa regime, will topple the government soon.
We want to bring down this murderous regime, along with other people whose rights are being violated, like the Tigrayans and other tribes in Ethiopia. We will unite and form a transitional government that will take care of all the people who have been oppressed.
Some fighters of OLA told France 24 that their movement's edge over the enemy is that they just have cause, which is just cause, and the fighters are committed to this cause as well.
We in the OLA, our goal is to liberate our people and our land. We're not afraid of death. We're not afraid to stand up to our enemies. If necessary, we will break our own bones into pieces to build the bridges that will lead our people to freedom. The government soldiers don't know why they fight, so they're afraid. But we're determined, and that's why we're winning.
Roma refugees in Kenya displaced by the war narrated the excess of the Ethiopian army in its conflict.
They told us this boy wasn't going to be the only one killed, that they had a list of 17 men who were going to be executed. So we were very scared. We immediately decided to flee to Kenya. That was on April 15th.
The OLA currently is less than 200 kilometers away from the capital of Addis Ababa. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi is visiting Ethiopia this week in a show of his nation's support from Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government. Wang's visit comes as Abiy faces mounting pressure from the Western government over the conflict that's caused the humanitarian crisis, with tens of thousands of people dead and millions in need of food and humanitarian aid. Ethiopia has long-standing relations with the U.S., its significant donor, as well as China, the nation's biggest bilateral lender. But Wang's visit brings to the forefront, a stark contrast of how the powers are responding to Ethiopia's worst crisis in decades. As we move on to Ethiopia-Sudan conflict, the Sudanese military on Tuesday accused Ethiopian forces yet again for a second time in the past few days of threatening its forces and civilians near a tense border section. The decade-long border dispute is threatening to escalate immediately. Sudanese army officials said they responded by firing rockets into Ethiopian territory in the early hours of Tuesday morning. While Ethiopia denied that it launched any attack in its border with Sudan, it blamed the border dispute on the Tigray forces. The Sudanese military official statement said that the Sudanese forces advanced towards Sakia area east of Barakat Noreen to the clear area of some of the pocket's threat ambushes the Ethiopian forces in order to secure the harvest season from any sudden attacks. This disputed area was the scene of a bloody clash just last year that left 90 Sudanese soldiers dead, according to an army statement. That concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Goodbye.